There's a stat that I'll credit Lindy's for. 8 or more victories from this football program since 1999, 4 times, something in that range. And they always followed it up, not by backing it up, but with a losing season. And of course, the last time we saw that was a team in 2022 that I thought was better than its 8-5 record. They lost a crazy bowl game and obviously took Michigan to the wire, etc. And then boom, 5-7. So don't want to see that happening. Now this team seems well prepared to go way beyond just a winning record.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where spending my time in Las Vegas, like the tables around me, I was like next to the Kings of the North and speaking to, Spencer McLaughlin, who I know you're very familiar with. Their projected records are like 10-2. Kings of the North had them at 11-1. And I'm, it's just surreal being an Illini football fan for so long. I always thought I was the positive one because most Illinois fans are, basketball fans. And I was one of the few that actually tuned into football as well. So I was always more upbeat and positive on the basketball side. But now, Illinois is getting college football playoff whispers. And when the initial lines came out, I believe on FanDuel, it's 8.5, but you can also find 7.5. I was like, okay, that's about right. But it's just the overall popularity. I feel like the sleeper aspect of Illinois is gone now. If we didn't have any other coach but Bret Bielema, I think I'd be a little bit more concerned. But Bret just seems to be like a guy who kind of understands how to deal with these sort of expectations and the fact that, last year's team won 10 games. They beat an SEC team in a bowl game. They're returning 17 of those starters. And the schedule is not easy, but I wouldn't say it's hard either. We avoid Penn State. We avoid Oregon. We avoid Michigan this year. So it's going to be a schedule which we're looking at that I think is going to test you. But I don't think it's something that is as daunting as maybe some of the other teams in the Big Ten Conference have. I think those two of those first 4 games of the season are going to dictate how the season goes.
And Sonny, we'll start at quarterback because, and we'll get back to the schedule because right at the tail end there, you made a really good point that I'd like to get back to, but we'll go Luke Altmyer because I think most quarterbacking situations, you look across the country and you think, okay, young guy, either completely inexperienced. And I don't know if a time that we had more elite programs starting first-year quarterbacks, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, that are still supposed to be able to crank out their 10 or 11 wins. But with Illinois, we've got a third-year starter in Luke Altmyer. So is it a situation where he should just keep, as he works with Barry Lunney, just continue to just fine-tune the approach and just master it? Or is there a lot more ceiling there with Luke Altmyer? Or if he just churns out the same year, you're going to be pretty happy with that?
I mean, we've got all 5 offensive linemen returning. We've got the entire running backs room except for Josh McCray coming back. It's a running back room where, if you're familiar with anything Bret Bielema, I always say Bret Bielema was born to coach Big Ten football and produce offensive linemen and running backs. And that's kind of what this team's forte is going to be. In regards to Luke, I feel like even if he just has a marginal improvement from last year, we're going to be just fine. He was a very solid quarterback for the most part. His chemistry with Barry Lunney Jr., as you mentioned, is something which he credited to coming back. Keep in mind, he could have left twice this offseason. First, there was talk about him entering the NFL draft. He was projected to be a late round draft pick. But then even when he announced that he was going to return to the Illini, then the Tennessee quarterback left. And every Tennessee insider that I was talking to hinted that they were going very hard after Luke and to try to bring him back to SEC country, where obviously, he started his career. But Luke, again, he said that he was bought into the program, bought into Bret Bielema, bought into Barry Lunney Jr. And, they had some convincing to do. But again, with the offensive linemen coming back, he trusts what they're building at Illinois. And I think if they're supposed to reach the ceilings that, 10 wins, 11 wins, it's going to be on the back of Luke.
So this offensive line, most teams going into the season, I would say there is more concern from most fans and analysts of teams at the offensive line position than anywhere else for most teams. It's just a difficult position to play. You can't play freshmen most of the time, the cohesion of the unit and everything. And as you just outlined, you got all 5 starters back. So, man, that is a huge benefit, a huge place of comfort there. Now, are these high-end guys that you could see moving on to the NFL?
Well, according to Brett Bielema, at least at Vegas days, media days, he said 3 of the 5 he thinks are going to be drafted into the NFL next year. JC Davis is the main one. He, I believe, had a 4th round grade this past offseason, but because of the Diego Pavia rule, he was allowed to come back. And because he's back, he's a guy who I think is going to anchor essentially the entire offensive line. But it's one of those where just having 5 guys back, as you said, is a cheat code. You know what else is a cheat code? Is having a senior quarterback in today's college football landscape. A guy who's going to be in the system for the 3rd straight year playing under Barry. I think I'm more comfortable with the offensive line. It's probably the defensive line, which I'm sure we're going to get to a little bit, which I think is going to be a little bit more of a question, just because even though there's talented guys there, a lot of them are going to be new. A lot of them are coming straight down south from Madison, Wisconsin. Offensive line, I'm not too worried about. I think it's probably on the top 3rd in the Big Ten Conference. I'm okay with that.
Little side note right here, courtesy Pack Daddy, who says, watched the Altmaier kid grow up in my church in Columbus, Mississippi. Good family. So we've got connections here in the chat. Very nice. All right. Wide receiver play. So Zakhari Franklin gone, Pat Bryant gone. And as is the case about 70% of the time in reviewing positional units, it's about, okay, what transfers came in? And so if you can get us caught up at wide receiver.
So this was a big cause of concern for Illinois last year as well. Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington both got drafted into the NFL. So there's a lot of questions within Illinois. Who is going to be able to take those steps and become the next, 1 and 2 for the Illini? Late in the cycle, they were able to nab Zakhari Franklin, who was one of the more accomplished wide receivers that was in all of college football, to be honest. Then you also had a guy named Pat Bryant, who a lot of people were very excited about, and he had marginally improved every single year, but there was still a big question on whether he was ready to be the number 1 guy on the roster. And sure enough, he absolutely was. He was one of the best stories of that Illinois team that won 10 games last year. But again, now we're doing the same thing. Our top 2 wide receivers those 2 guys are gone. We have Hudson Clement, which we got from West Virginia. And Mark, this is how I diagnose whether I'm excited about a transfer or not. I go to the his former team's message boards, and I like to see if the fans are upset if the guy left, or if it's one of those, okay, cool, good luck. Maybe he needs a different environment. It was definitely the first when it comes to Hudson Clement. A lot of Mountaineer fans were very upset that he decided to leave, and for that reason, I'm excited that he's coming back. As for who's going to be the other guy, the younger guy, that's going to hopefully, of course, take the step that Pat Bryant took last year. Now, obviously, those are big expectations. The good thing is that wide receiver room, which I think was the worst in the entire conference when Brett Bielema took over 4 years ago, is actually quite talented now. I think Colin Dixon is a name that you should absolutely circle and pay attention to. I think he showed a lot last year. Obviously, Hank Beatty, I think, is going to have a big role on the team. They're also very excited about a transfer named Justin Bowick, who apparently has been doing really well during camp. And we still have a 4-star from a couple of seasons ago named Malik Elzy, who's a hometown kid who hasn't quite had the opportunity yet. But you're talking about 4 or 5 guys who can hopefully fulfill the role of a Pat Bryant. It's just nice because 4 years ago we were just hoping for one guy to step up, whereas now if one guy isn't able to do it, there's more talent in that wide receiver room that we can give them an opportunity to see what they have.
Got Sonny Verma on the line from Lockdown, Illinois, and as our buddy Jackson has done, very nice, Jackson. We appreciate that. Setting us up to let everyone know that Sonny produces content. So usually when can people first jump on your content on a daily basis?
Daily basis, it's Locked On Illini. Producing a half hour to 28 to 35 minutes every single day, Monday through Friday. But you can also see me when the season comes around. I also cover the Chicago Bears on Bears on Tap. And Illini Cast was my original baby, which I also try to do once a week, but we're going to wait till the season starts with that.
All right, Sonny, you warned us about the defensive front, and I see that a couple of Wisconsin players are coming through the transfer portal and some other additions from other teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're excited about, James Thompson Jr. I think he's one of those guys that Brett Bielema brings up just by himself more often than not. Kurt Neal was another kid we got from the Badgers. I think there's a kid I'm really excited about, Pat Farrell. I think he could be one of the breakout stars that I like to call like the next generation of Illini players. Again, we have 17 of 22 starters returning this year. I think we're replacing 28 scholarships on next year's team. So after this year, and that's why the season is so important, to be honest. They're going to be rehauling that roster next season. I think Pat Farrell can be one of those stars. The defensive line position is interesting because we've had so much talent there. Keith Randolph, Jerson Newton. But for some reason, we haven't been able to really recruit to the level that we're producing. We have a great defensive line coach named Terrence Jameson, who's been rumored for a lot of the top jobs when it comes to defensive line coaches at some of the Blue Bloods. But for whatever reason, they haven't been able to bring the Blue Star talent in. This year is going to be a little bit interesting. Again, they're bringing a lot of the Wisconsin guys. Brett Bielema has a really good relationship with who's the former defensive coordinator with Wisconsin, and he was an analyst with Illinois for that 1 year. He got the interim job, but he wasn't picked because Luke Fickell. Do you recall the name? I'm blanking right now.
Analyst at
he was a defensive coordinator for Jim Leonard. Thank you, Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, one of the best.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. There's nothing Jackson doesn't know. But Jim Leonard and Brett have a very good relationship after it didn't work out in Wisconsin. And Jim actually recruited a lot of these guys. And so, he was kind of the middleman when it comes to setting up contact and relationships and scouting. And once he gave the thumbs up, Brett Bielema, he talks about as if this is going to be a strength. And I do believe him, but because I haven't seen it necessarily. And, again, you're talking about a lot of new guys. It's probably one of the big question marks for me coming into the year.
Breaking down the Illini with Sonny Verma, Locked On Illini, also the Illini Cast right here on YouTube. And Gabe Jacobs could have went to the NFL. He's coming back and kind of sizes up the linebackers along with Dylan Rosiak. So seems like you got experience and production coming back there.
Yeah, exactly right. Gabe Jacobs is he was on the list of the Big Ten preseason honors, where the Big Ten picked 16 names. All the coaches picked 16 names, and it's surreal that two of them are Illinois players. You had Luke Altmaier and Gabe Jacobs on that list. Gabe's one of those guys who could have made a lot of money early in his career jumping to an SEC team, and he could have made a lot of money this past offseason jumping to an NFL team. But he said he had a really good conversation with Keith Randolph, who decided to stay an extra year 2 years ago. And he just believes in the training and the development that's going on in Champaign right now. And so I think Gabe is one of those guys that if he was playing for Ohio State or if he was playing for Michigan, he'd be talked about a lot more. And he's going to be the star on the defensive side of the football.
We saw one of the best secondaries in college football a couple of years ago, one of the best secondaries we've seen across college football in recent years. And now we've got another star-studded secondary. Xavier Scott's locked in. And I see a stat here, 106 starts coming back just in the secondary.
It's probably the room that I enjoy watching the most. You mentioned Xavier Scott, who's one of the three players who represented Illinois at Big Ten Media Days. But there's another guy who I think is going to become a full-fledged star this upcoming year, and that's Matthew Bailey. His season was cut short 2 years ago. Last year, he had a very solid season. This year, I think he's going to become the star that he was meant to become. 1 second, Mark. Sorry.
Sure.
And so, okay, All right, sorry about that, Mark. I got a 4 and 7-year-old.
No worries, Sonny. I know the deal there.
Yeah, but it's Xavier Scott's one of the best stories because he's a kid that didn't have a scholarship offer, and Brett Bielema got to watch him, and once he saw him, he's like, "Yeah, I want to offer him something, but I don't have an extra scholarship to give him. If he steps foot day one onto campus, I'll give him that scholarship." He did. His first start was in that Michigan that you referenced a couple seasons ago, which we were so close to winning, and he kind of hasn't looked back since. And that's just kind of the embodiment of Brett Bielema, right? Just finding a diamond in the rough and then letting them reach their maximum potential, and that's what Xavier Scott is.
Right, Sonny, I'm going to get back to something. You breeze through the schedule real quick, just kind of highlight it. But a lot of people are commenting in the chat about this game, and I've said this a number of times, most notably when we've had our Indiana guys on, that this is going to be one of these games that's not going to take the nation by storm. It's not LSU and Clemson and Ohio State and Texas, et cetera. But when Indiana and Illinois get together to start off the Big Ten season, it's going to have that feel of, and I don't know that this is fair to either team, but it's going to have that imposter feel that whoever loses it, well, write them off. They're done. See, this is the demarcation that if you win this, okay, we'll continue to monitor you to see if you're still in the race and if you're still worth it. But if you lose it, forget it. And again, I don't necessarily think that will turn out to be the truth, but it is a huge game going out to Bloomington to start out the Big Ten season.
Sorry, it really is. But before we get to that, I actually want to talk about week 2. I think that Duke game could be monumental because Duke is one of those really talented teams that I think a lot of people are overlooking as well.
Yep.
And the fact that that game is at Durham makes me, nervous about that game also. But if Illinois is able to come out victorious at that Duke game, and then all of a sudden you're talking about, I think as soon as that game is over, Brett Bielema, Curt Cignetti, we know those two guys are not shy. They're going to get up on every press conference, and they're going to talk about how week 4, how it's going to be such a big matchup, and they're going to try to get game day, I truly believe, for that matchup. To the Cinderella teams from last year. And as you mentioned, I think if both teams are 3-0 at this point, look, Indiana was a fantastic story last year, but a lot of Illinois fans are, I'll admit, a tad bit envious because if it weren't for Indiana, I think Illinois would have been that Cinderella story that everybody was talking about with that just the unexpected run out of nowhere. A lot of Illinois fans think we could have beaten Indiana last year if they had the opportunity. And now week 4 is going to be kind of a chance to prove it. And really, when you think of these two programs, Curt and Brett, I think they both got this game circled because we know what the blue bloods in the Big Ten are, right? You have the Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn States. Right now, the Iowas and Wisconsins, Iowa's still Iowa, but Wisconsin's struggling a little bit. That second tier, there's an opening there for a program like Indiana, like Illinois. Right now, we're recruiting the same caliber of players. We're obviously in the same geographical area. And if Indiana had the leg up last year going to the college football playoff, if Illinois can win that head-to-head matchup, week 4 in Bloomington, as you mentioned, I think that would be a catalyst for, getting the over on the wins this year. Because all of a sudden, 2 of the big tests that you had in the first 4 weeks, you've been able to take care of. You're going to have USC the following week. It's a huge game. I think if both teams are 3-0 coming into the game, it's going to be talked about as the biggest game in Brett Bielema's Illinois tenure.
Absolutely. And Sonny, you're going to possibly take away some of the kind words that you spoke of me to start the conversation, because when I did my prediction videos, I actually did have the Illini going to Duke and taking a stumble there early in the season. Now, if I may or may not hold to that, making predictions in June is not my thing, but I just kind of go along with that deal. But we'll see once we get to that point if I'm going to pull the trigger on a Duke upset. They've got a really good defense. And as you mentioned, they bring in the Tulane quarterback, Darian Mensah. They're no joke. That will be a heck of a ball game. It's already slated for a noon ABC or ESPN game. Okay.
Yeah, it's a game which I think a lot of people are overlooking because there's so much hype behind the Indiana game. But I'm not looking past that Duke game because the more I've been researching about them, I've spoken to the Locked On Blue Devils host. They're going to be a really solid team. And, if the game were in Champaign, maybe I'd feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But the fact that we're going to have to travel to Durham, I think it's going to be a game that Brett's going to make sure the team is focused on.
Sonny, before we let you go, this team appears to be so airtight as you go from position unit to position unit. Sure, wide receivers may not be household names, need to step up, find a number one guy. Some nuance to some things. The running back room isn't really highly proven. All those guys have carries, they have experience. Josh McCray, as you mentioned, lost to Georgia. But it just seems to be, a strong unit followed by strong unit. What do you think needs to be cleaned up the most in August?
I think, quite honestly, probably finding out losing Josh McCray is huge because he was such a rock in that running back room. We have Caden Fagan back there who looks like a linebacker playing running back, but he's been injured the past 2 seasons. So there are going to be some questions when it comes to who's going to be the running back that steps up and whether they can keep that room healthy. But outside that, I think the biggest question is going to be simply who becomes the star. As you mentioned, this team has a lot of very good players, B+ type of players. Last year, we were able to get Pat Bryant to become an A-, an A-level player. Who's going to be those guys who we know Gabe is going to be fantastic. Xavier Scott. I think Matthew Bailey is going to be one of those guys. Luke Altmaier. But then you're still going to need a couple more in order to reach those 9, 10, 11 wins.
Right, Sonny. Appreciate you being here. And if there's anything you need to say about what you've got available, certainly take it away from here. Everybody can catch Sonny's X account as well, as you see right there, the Sonny V. But what are people going to hear from you the rest of the week here and going into next week, I should say?
Yeah, it's just all Big Ten Media Days content for now. I'm basically recapping everything that the individual players said when it comes to Illinois, doing a big overall recap of what the Big Ten Conference did. But besides that, it's just, now that I always consider Big Ten Media Days the unofficial kickoff of college football season. And so now we talk about, what battles, what guys may break out, which position groups I'm looking forward to, monitoring during these camps and whatnot. So it's just, if you're interested in the Illini at all, I would really appreciate it. Even during this off season, when, as you know, there's almost nothing to talk about. I was churning out, a half hour to 40 minutes of content every single day. So I'm glad football season's coming around. Let's just put it that way.
All right, Sonny. Great to see you.
Always appreciate the invite, Mark. Thank you.